Ariane Lotti joins me now. You're an agricultural entrepreneur and managing partner for Tenuta San Carlo. And you're going to be listening in and being one of the panel on the future for EU farming discussion that we're having at the forum later today. Now, as a farmer, Ariane, what do you want to hear? What do you want to say?
Hi, thank you. So I think this is one of the most important topics of the day and a very complex one, because as a farmer who manages pretty complex farm business, there are a number of issues that I face on a daily basis to survive as a farmer farming in Europe. We're talking about financial and market risks, climate risks, and then just the challenges of operating in a pretty complex regulatory environment as well. And so on a daily basis, I do a lot of different things, and it's a very dynamic business, but the policy piece of that is really important to what I do, and how we structure the CAP reforms. It will determine the future of the agricultural landscape in Europe.
Tell us a little bit more about your farm and just paint the picture for us.
Yes. So I manage 480 hectares of land in southern Tuscany, about 2 hours north of Rome and 2 hours south of Florence. And I grow organic rice and grains and legumes. So I have 3 planting seasons a year. And half of my land is in a regional park, the regional park of Maremma. And so I have some conservation land and pine forests. And then a small herd of cattle, because we have some marginal lands that we develop for pasture, and then a small agritourism. So I have a very diversified business, which is the key to the survival of the farm.
And in between all of that, because that's a pretty busy planting season, let alone anything else, you have the time to come and share your voice at forums like this. And you said it's important to have your voice within the policy framework.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here as a speaker. It is a very busy time on the farm, but it's important to think about the policy questions we're facing today are extraordinarily important and complex. But I think it's very important to actually apply them to the reality of farming on the ground, because farming is a very real thing. You know, if we have policy goals and we apply them to farming, we hope to reach those goals over time, because we can't just change overnight. And I think what we're all hoping for is a better CAP that helps farmers address the challenges of the 21st century. And then can meet consumer demand and environmental objectives as well. And that's a very challenging task. And so I think the goal is to really think, though, where are farm businesses today, and what can be the process that takes us to the objectives. I hope the dialogue today is a dialogue, and that we don't speak in black and white, but that we engage with what is the complexity of the issues before us.
And how important is it to share your examples of what it is like on the land in Italy to people like the Commissioner for the EU, Phil Hogan, who will be with us this afternoon? Because you talked about it's direct, it's tangible what you do, and things like CAP reform haven't always had words like, direct and tangible associated with it.
Right, exactly. Well, and the thing that's useful is that I have, a variety of different examples on my farm to actually think through what the policy consequences are on the ground. So on the one hand, I receive CAP subsidies, and so I get a CAP payment every year. And on the other hand, I have 100 hectares of land that were enrolled in a 20-year conservation program that just ended in November. And so I have also the experience of what it means to lose EU conservation funding on that land, and the decisions I've had to make as a business to be able to continue to manage that land. And then I participate as well in applications through the rural development programs for funding on supply chains. I deal with issues of compliance. So I had a compliance inspection in late 2016, right before Christmas. And so I have a very direct experience with how these policies impact a farm that is large, that I produce a lot of food, and I do it organically because of the environmental kind of objectives around organic agriculture, but I do produce a lot of food. And so the question before us too is, as we think about the CAP, is do Europeans want European grown food? And what type of food do they want?
I can tell from the accent, though, that you have another perspective to share. So in looking at the US federal sustainable food system, agricultural policy, the Farm Bill, I mean, when you have those kind of comparisons, what do you see as obstacles, threats, opportunities there?
Yeah, and so the US and the EU farm policies are very different because the farming systems are very different. And so as we look at how policies have been built over time and where we're going with policy, it's important to start first with the land, right? What kind of land do we have, and what kind of climate do we have, and what kind of population density do we have? And that's really why, for example, the EU CAP is so much more multifunctional and it supports rural development in its many forms, and the US policy is much more based on, large-scale industrial agriculture. It's just very different landscapes with very different population density and objectives. And so I hope that the CAP continues to place at least objectives on the multifunctionality of agriculture and the ability to produce higher quality food products, but sees rural areas and farms as being integral to the fabric of Europe. And I can say that in my area, the smaller farms that are in my area, because of the collapse in wheat prices, some are being able to kind of redo their farm businesses and reinvent themselves, but there's a lot of abandoned land right now around where I am. And so as we think about the future of subsidies, we have to think about, what does that mean for our rural areas?
Well, I hope you pose those questions to the forum. I hope you receive some answers or insights. And Ariane, I hope you enjoy the forum today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.